You know him as the harmless, goofy little fellow with a toothbrush mustache, a bowler hat, and that funny, waddling walk. But did you know that this exact same silent clown was considered a highly dangerous threat to national security by the American FBI? They literally compiled a massive 2,000-page dossier on him, and eventually they straight up kicked him out of the United States. Welcome, fellow time travelers, to the BrainBoost English Podcast, where history does not just sit dead in a dusty textbook, but dances right in front of your face. Pull up a chair, grab a half-eaten bag of popcorn from the 1920s, and start crunching. Imagine we are sitting in a silent, black and white movie theater. But be careful. Take a quick look at the seat next to you. There might be an undercover FBI agent pointing a hidden microphone at your face, just waiting to see if you dare to laugh at an anti-capitalist joke. Let us rewind the tape to the very beginning. The year is 1889. Charlie Chaplin was born into a world that was anything but a comedy. If you think your childhood was tough because your parents did not buy you the latest gadget, brace yourselves. Young Charlie lived in the slums of Victorian London. We are talking about the kind of bone-chilling poverty that makes Charles Dickens' novels look like a luxury vacation resort. You could practically smell the coal smoke, the open sewers, and the absolute despair in the air. His father was a talented stage singer, but unfortunately, he had a much stronger relationship with the bottom of a whiskey bottle than with his own family. He drank himself to an early grave when Charlie was just a little kid. His mother, Hannah, tried her absolute best to keep the family afloat. She was also a stage actress, but she suffered from severe, untreated mental health issues. Her mind slowly deteriorated under the crushing weight of poverty until she was tragically institutionalized in an insane asylum. So, what happens to a little boy with a deceased, deadbeat dad and a mother locked away in a psychiatric ward? He gets thrown into the workhouse. The workhouse was basically a Victorian nightmare institution where poor people were sent to do grueling, back-breaking labor in exchange for a piece of stale, rock-hard bread and a bowl of watery, flavorless soup. It was miserable, dark, freezing cold, and utterly depressing. Charlie spent his formative years scrubbing floors and fighting off starvation. But here is the crazy, mind-blowing twist about human psychology. Tragedy breeds comedy. When you hit absolute rock bottom, sometimes the only way to survive the crushing weight of reality is to laugh at the absolute absurdity of your own misery. Charlie did not let the trauma crush his spirit. Instead, he weaponized it. When he eventually found his way to the United States on a vaudeville tour and created his iconic character, the Tramp, he was not just making up a random silly guy to get a cheap laugh. The Tramp was an absolute masterpiece born directly from his own childhood trauma. Look closely at the outfit next time you see a picture. The excessively baggy pants, the ridiculously tight coat, the oversized shoes worn on the wrong feet, and the tiny bowler hat sitting on top of his curly hair. It is a walking, breathing paradox. It is the outfit of a man who desperately wants to maintain his dignity, pretending to be a wealthy, sophisticated gentleman, while clearly wearing clothes he dug out of a random garbage alley. The Tramp was the ultimate underdog. He was a guy who had absolutely nothing in his pockets, who was constantly being kicked around by the police and the wealthy elite, but still politely tipped his hat to a passing lady and carefully dusted off a dirty park bench before sitting on it. The audiences in the theaters did not just laugh at him, they saw their own reflections in him. The working class, the poor immigrants, the people struggling to survive in a harsh, unforgiving capitalist society, they looked at the silver screen and said, "Hey, That little funny guy gets exactly how we feel. By 1915, Charlie Chaplin was not just famous, he was a global phenomenon. We are talking about a level of fame that makes today's internet influencers look like absolute amateurs. The world came down with a severe case of what they called Chaplinitis. He was the very first pop culture icon of the modern world. People were entirely obsessed with him. There was Chaplin merchandise everywhere, Chaplin comic strips in the Sunday papers, and hit Chaplin pop songs playing on the radio. He was making an astronomical, mind-boggling amount of money. The starving kid from the muddy London slums who used to eat discarded apple cores off the street was now signing million-dollar studio contracts and building his very own massive movie studio in Hollywood. He went from rags to unimaginable riches in the blink of an eye. But, as the old saying goes, more money, more problems. And in Chaplin's specific case, more money meant more highly questionable, incredibly toxic romantic decisions. Behind the sweet, innocent, bumbling smile of the tramp was a man whose personal life was an absolute chaotic train wreck playing out on the front pages of the tabloids. Let us spill the historical tea right now, because this is where the story gets incredibly messy and dark. Charlie Chaplin had a very specific and, frankly, deeply problematic type. He had an undeniable, repeated obsession with marrying girls who were far, far too young for him. If he were alive and operating in Hollywood today, he would definitely be canceled on social media within 5 minutes flat. His first wife, Mildred Harris, was just 16 years old when they rushed into marriage. Chaplin was 29. The marriage was a complete and utter disaster from day one, fueled by intense rumors of fake pregnancies and constant, screaming fights, and it ended in a very bitter, highly publicized divorce. But did the genius filmmaker learn his lesson from this massive mistake? Absolutely not. Next up on the wedding aisle was Lita Grey. How old was she? 16. How old was Charlie? 35. They got married in absolute secret down in Mexico because marrying a 16-year-old was incredibly scandalous even back in the roaring 20s. Lita Grey's divorce settlement a few years later was a massive media circus. She completely aired out all of his dirty laundry in a thick legal document, exposing his bizarre, controlling demands and cruel behavior behind closed doors. The press had an absolute field day printing every scandalous detail. The beloved, innocent clown was suddenly being painted by the newspapers as a manipulative, predatory villain. Then came Paulette Goddard, who was actually a bit older, in her 20s, but that relationship also eventually crashed and burned in the Hollywood Hills. Finally, at the ripe old age of 54, Chaplin decided to marry Una O'Neill. She was 18 years old. Yes, you heard that math correctly. It was a staggering 36-year age gap. Una's father, the famous American playwright Eugene O'Neill, was so incredibly furious about the wedding that he completely disowned his daughter and tragically never spoke a single word to her again for the rest of his life. Surprisingly, this final marriage actually lasted until Chaplin died, but it forever cemented his reputation as a Hollywood eccentric with a deeply controversial and messy private life. So, here we have a man who is making the entire planet roll on the floor laughing at his physical comedy, while simultaneously navigating a personal life filled with toxic relationships, massive age gaps, and sensationalized, ugly court battles. The public still lined up to buy tickets to his movies, but the mainstream media was starting to turn against him. And unfortunately for Charlie, the gossip columnists were not the only ones keeping a very close eye on his controversial behavior. The United States government was watching him too, very, very closely. while the paparazzi were busy hiding in the bushes trying to snap photos of his latest teenage bride, a much darker and more powerful enemy was quietly building a case against him in Washington, D.C. Enter J. Edgar Hoover, the incredibly paranoid and fiercely conservative director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Hoover hated Charlie Chaplin with a burning, fiery passion. You see, to the FBI, Chaplin was not just a funny guy falling over chairs. He was a dangerous, radical subversive. Why? Because in Chaplin's movies, the authority figures always looked like absolute fools. The police officers, famously known as the Keystone Cops, were constantly portrayed as bumbling, incompetent idiots who chased the poor tramp around but always ended up tripping over their own shoelaces or falling into muddy puddles. Furthermore, Chaplin's films always showed deep sympathy for the working class, the homeless, and the factory workers who were being chewed up and spit out by the harsh gears of modern industry. His movie, Modern Times, was a brilliant, hilarious critique of the soul-crushing nature of factory labor. To regular people, it was comedy gold. To J. Edgar Hoover, it smelled dangerously like communist propaganda. But the real turning point, the moment Chaplin truly poked the bear and crossed the point of no return, happened in 1940. The political climate in Europe was terrifying. The shadow of fascism was spreading across the continent under the brutal regime of Adolf Hitler. Back in the United States, however, the general mood was strict isolationism. The American government and the public did not want to get involved in another messy European war. Hollywood studio executives were practically walking on eggshells. They were absolutely terrified of making any anti-Nazi movies because they did not want to lose the highly lucrative German box office market. They were putting corporate profits above human rights. Chaplin looked at this cowardly silence and basically said, "Screw that." He decided to put his money where his mouth is. Using a massive budget of $1 in a million out of his own pocket, he wrote, directed, and starred in his first true sound film, The Great Dictator. It was a massive, incredibly risky gamble. Chaplin played two roles, a poor, persecuted Jewish barber, and Adenoid Hinkle, a ruthless, ridiculous parody of Adolf Hitler. Chaplin realized that Hitler and his iconic tramp character actually shared the exact same toothbrush mustache. He famously claimed that Hitler had stolen his mustache, and he was determined to use comedy to destroy the dictator's terrifying image. He turned the most feared man on the planet into a laughingstock, mocking his angry speeches and making him look like an arrogant, childish buffoon, playing with a balloon globe. But it was the final scene of the movie that completely shook the world. Dropping the comedy entirely, Chaplin looks directly into the camera and delivers a passionate, breathtaking 5-minute speech. He pleads for universal brotherhood, democracy, and an end to greed, hatred, and intolerance. It was one of the most powerful moments in cinematic history. The movie was a massive commercial smash hit. The audience loved it. But the conservative politicians and the FBI were absolutely furious. They saw a wealthy, foreign-born Hollywood elite lecturing the American public about politics. They accused him of being a warmonger, trying to drag the United States into a bloody conflict. When the Second World War finally ended, the political atmosphere in America became incredibly toxic. The Cold War began, and a widespread, hysterical fear of communism swept across the nation. This era was known as the Red Scare, led by the infamous Senator Joseph McCarthy. It was a vicious political witch hunt. Anyone with progressive views, anyone who supported labor unions, or anyone who dared to criticize the government was immediately labeled a communist traitor and blacklisted from working in Hollywood. Chaplin, who had lived and paid massive taxes in America for 40 years, had proudly kept his British passport and consistently refused to become an American citizen. He argued that he was a citizen of the world. To the ultra-patriots in the government, this was the ultimate insult. J. Edgar Hoover decided it was time to destroy the clown once and for all. He ordered his agents to dig up every single piece of dirt they could find. They wiretapped his phones, intercepted his mail, and compiled a staggering dossier of thousands of pages. They even tried to destroy his public image by throwing their weight behind a sensationalized paternity suit. A troubled young actress named Joan Barry claimed Chaplin was the father of her child. When a scientific blood test definitively proved that he was absolutely not the father, the court inexplicably threw out the scientific evidence and ordered Chaplin to pay child support anyway. It was a classic kangaroo court, a rigged game designed to drag his reputation through the mud and paint him as a moral degenerate. The final, crushing blow came in September of 1952. Chaplin had just finished his beautifully melancholic film, Limelight. He packed up his belongings, gathered his wife Una and their children, and boarded the luxurious ocean liner Queen Elizabeth to sail to London for the movie's grand premiere. It was supposed to be a triumphant return to his home country, but J. Edgar Hoover had laid a brilliant, incredibly nasty trap. The moment the ship sailed out of American territorial waters, the United States Attorney General publicly announced that Charlie Chaplin's re-entry permit had been officially revoked. The door was slammed shut behind him. They essentially told him that if he ever wanted to set foot on American soil again, he would have to submit to a rigorous, humiliating interrogation about his political beliefs and his moral behavior. Chaplin was stunned. After giving the American public 4 decades of laughter, joy, and billions of dollars in economic value, he was kicked to the curb like a piece of garbage. Did he beg? Did he crawl back on his knees? No, he possessed too much pride for that. He essentially told the American government to keep their toxic paranoia. He completely abandoned his life in Hollywood, sold his massive studio, and moved his family to a breathtaking, peaceful mansion in Switzerland, overlooking the crystal-clear waters of Lake Geneva. While Hollywood was tearing itself apart in paranoid witch hunts, Chaplin was enjoying Swiss chocolate, breathing fresh mountain air, and living his absolute best life in luxurious exile. Fast forward exactly 20 years. The year is 1972. The political climate in America had drastically changed. The hysterical Red Scare was largely seen as a dark, embarrassing chapter in American history. A new generation of filmmakers and critics looked back at Chaplin's incredible body of work and realized what a monumental injustice had been done to one of the greatest cinematic geniuses who ever lived. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences decided it was time to bury the hatchet and formally apologize. They invited him back to Los Angeles to receive an honorary Oscar. Chaplin was 82 years old, physically frail, and understandably terrified that the audience might actually boo him. When he stepped out onto the brightly lit stage of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, the orchestra began playing the beautiful, melancholic melody of Smile, a song that Chaplin himself had composed. What happened next still gives people goosebumps. The entire auditorium, packed with the biggest stars in Hollywood, stood up, and they clapped. They did not just politely clap for a minute. They clapped, they cheered, and they openly wept for a staggering 12 uninterrupted minutes. It remains the longest standing ovation in the entire history of the Academy Awards. The frail old man stood there, tears streaming down his face, clutching his golden statue, completely overwhelmed by the ocean of love and regret washing over him. It was the ultimate poetic vindication. The man who had spent his entire legendary career never saying a single word on the silver screen ended up delivering the loudest, most powerful message of the 20th century. He proved that true artistic brilliance and genuine human empathy can never be permanently silenced by government intimidation or political paranoia. In the end, the rigid, powerful men in the crisp FBI suits are mostly forgotten by history, but the funny little tramp in the oversized shoes and the battered bowler hat will continue to make the world laugh and think forever.